Hello and award Collisions YYC. Welcome to my friends and my guest this morning, Mr. Pablo Romero and Jeff Couillard. How you doing, gents?
Doing great. Thanks.
100%. They're smiling. They're nodding. The joys of two people on a podcast. You go. No, you go. You go. Okay. Well, I'm gonna make it really easy. I love to let the audience into the tent as soon as possible. I'm gonna direct this, Pablo, at you. You guys are both the co-CEOs, which we're gonna unpack a little bit later, but we're gonna save that one for down the road, of the Ally Co. What the heck's an Ally Co? So let's jump into the elevator, Pablo, and give us a little bit of a who's who and what's what.
Yeah, I think the name itself, we played around with it, and the ally portion, we're always, as we were diving into this work, there was, what's the difference between, allyship and an activist? And we just felt like ally, for us, that word means doing work with the people that we choose to do work with and not to them. So that word was carefully chosen. But then also when we looked at the acronym, it was TACO. And we thought, we can have a lot of fun with this. Bring out some of my Latin roots.
I did not see that at first glance. As a marketer, I'm ashamed. I should have saw that right away.
It's funny. It's a good hook. People always wonder what the heck's going on with that. And then when we explain it, boom, it clicks, and we get into all the good puns. So
I love it. Well, on your homepage, your website, in case anyone is following along in front of their computer, the allyco.world, there's a picture of somebody wearing a taco hat. So creating leaderful teams, that kind of caught me. It was a bit of a tongue twister. So what I love with versus I'm doing something to someone, I'm doing something with someone. I love the inclusive nature of that right away. So what is a leaderful team?
Yeah, for us, it was when I met Jeff, we talked about our connector, Vince Fowler. Shout out to Vince Fowler for connecting Jeff.
He'll be listening.
Yeah. When he connected us, we were part of a peer group. Jeff introduced us, the group, to the right use of power framework. And, I'll fast forward as we got to know it a bit better, I started to realize, oh my goodness, like when we talk about, we were on this journey of trying to liberate leadership and do it differently. And this right use of power framework just became so clear for us as the way that us as leaders could operationalize our power and make truly, something positive, deeper connections, and positive impact. So we thought about, okay, the distribution of power, if we can start to do that in a conscious way, we can actually create a more leaderful community, society, right? Where we can surface and shift these unspoken power dynamics that are out there that are currently, creating disconnection, reducing, capacity for people to deal with the cognitive overload of what's jumping at them.
Of the world we live in.
And really just to amplify positive impact. So that's where it comes from.
Because when I hear power dynamics, it's so easy. If I just was like going to hit a red or green, I hear the word power dynamics, I probably hit the red button. It's like just out of instinct. If I think about it, I'm like, it can mean things. But if I don't think about it and I just react to it, like the problem to be solved, power dynamics are maybe often misused, do they have a bad rap? Is that a way to say it? Just to the worst. As soon as I hear it, I feel myself pucker a little bit. I'm like, sounds like some asshole using his position of power. Okay, I immediately go to negative, and I'm just checking my own brain on that. But I'm assuming that's deeply rooted. Jeff, obviously, you brought that into the. Is that part of the framework that you guys have to start with, of like kind of unpacking? Like, let's just treat it for what it is, and then work to make it positive versus negative.
Yeah, 100%. One of my first questions to you is going to be, when you hear the word power, what happens? And it sounds like you pucker up and maybe you lean away from it a little bit. And that's not an uncommon reaction. Most of us have experienced misuses of power, right? Each of us has this unique history with power.
I have misused it. I have also misused it in the past.
And 100%. And we've all misused it. And so we've been on the receiving end and the misusing end of the power dynamic. And when we shift gears and realize that power is actually neutral, it's how we use it and how it's experienced by others, then suddenly it becomes a tool for the things that Pablo's mentioning, for more capacity, for connection and trust building, for a sense of belonging, all the things that we want in our workplaces to start with, but also just in our lives, generally speaking. And so looking at power as really the underlying force that drives leadership. Most leadership development programs, most leadership conversations don't explicitly talk about power. Right. And not talking about that as like, I don't know what the metaphor is, but there's, trying to talk about ice hockey without talking about ice, right? Playing the game of hockey, but not mentioning that it's played on ice would be a strange thing. But yet we talk about leadership all the time and we don't talk about power. And so it's a space that I think deserves more conversation. And it's certainly a big piece of the work we do.
I like what you said about talking about ice hockey without talking about the ice. And but it also kind of takes me to that. I think what's the joke? Two fish hanging out. One fish says, "Oh, don't you think the water's cold?" And the other fish goes, "Water?" Like,
What the hell's water?
what do you mean? It just is, when you first encounter working with an organization, obviously, well, let's give us a quick, who do you typically work with? Like, who's your profile? Who typically is in the room when you guys are facilitating some of this work? And then we'll unpack a little bit what that looks like and how people end up maybe in the room, what motivates, but who's there? And then we'll talk about how they get there.
Yeah, I can speak quickly to that, and Jeff, let me know if I miss anything. We did this work early on, and we kind of landed on two core personas. One of them we'll call it's a supporting sponsor, and we've got for example a client there who's in the energy field, one of the largest energy companies in the world. And this persona is someone who understands the value of investing in their team's growth, in leadership, competencies and awareness and skill. They can't necessarily participate in that work because they're off doing the things that their board and their peers are expecting them to do. So, or they travel a lot, right? There's something that keeps them busy. So what they do is they support their other leaders with time. So we're not going to make you do this off the side of your desk late in the evenings. This is going to be built into your day-to-day. Two, we're going to give you the funding, right? The money, the budget. And you're going to work with these consultants and design what's going to be most meaningful for you and your team. So the supporting sponsor is not necessarily participating in like the journey, but they're fully aware of it and looped in, and they're providing the resources. Jeff, maybe we'll switch it up.
I got a question. This might be This might be a self-serving question for you guys, but is that leader, that supporting sponsor, I would guess that they're also not the best person to deliver this information. Unless they are trained in it, they have the skills in it. They really, even if they live it, I still believe some things land differently when you bring in an outside influence into your organization. I agree with, like, if you don't support it, champion it, create time, create money, create opportunity for it, it's going to die in the vine. But I would still argue that being a supporting sponsor is way better than I'm going to teach this to my leaders. I don't want to differentiate that from good coaching and some good support. But engaging in a program like this, I've just seen very few of those succeed. Where an outside organization coming in that's given the support, as you said, tends to be more successful, but that's just my armchair anecdotal. That's quantitative, qualitative data point of one.
No, it's a great comment, and we believe it too. We use the analogy of when you're in the dance, there's only so much you can see.
Yeah.
Right. We get to be on the balcony and kind of see those power dynamics in play. And sometimes you can't be a participant and the one with the most power in the room. You know what I mean? Doing some of the work that we do.
I've joked, I wrote about it a little bit, I'm curious as hell, the HIPPO, the highest paid person's opinion. And sometimes you get defaulted to having the right ideas just because you're the one who gets paid the most and you stand up in the meeting. Doesn't mean it's right power-wise. So Jeff, jump in.
Yeah, so that's an important piece of the sponsor, whoever's sponsoring the work, is still part of that system. And so there's some level of power that we have to navigate and negotiate. And because our work tends to happen at a deeper level, like we're not talking that kind of checkbox training where we're coming in and delivering something and then leaving and expecting it to be operationalized. Our work really does exist at a deeper level with teams, and we're alongside them for the journey. And again, it's that with, not to kind of perspective. What does it mean to work with teams? And there's a type of leader that we call them the courageous activist. And they're the ones who roll their sleeves up and say, I want to be a part of this. I want to learn alongside my team. They're often in kind of a chief of staff role, a chief operating officer role, head of, director of whatever program it happens to be, but they're willing to do the work. They're willing to lean into the uncomfortableness of not having the answers. Again, that highest paid person's opinion, a dynamic that gets created is they can't be vulnerable. They can't show weakness. They can't learn alongside people. They have to do that outside of the team. And so our job is to create the conditions for that courageous activist and their team to really lean into the work and to have those tough conversations and get aligned and then move forward as a team.
How often, this is anecdotal, no real names used at any point, do you get into a situation like this? And even when someone is a supporting sponsor, you quickly find out that they're a big part of, we're just going to call it the challenges. We're not going to call it the issues, the problem. Often because these are more senior individuals that came from the camp of, I have to have all the answers. I have to be all knowing. I have to ride in on my white horse of whatever ilk you want to ride in on. I've seen so many coaching where individuals are like, holy shit, once we unpack this, we got to bring our leader in because they're actually a big part of what keeps this dysfunction alive. Is there a percentage you want to throw at that? Does that happen for you guys? Or again, am I making that up?
I'd say it's 100%.
Oh,
and
nice.
I'll tell you why.
I thought you might go 50-50, Pablo. Oh, amazing.
No.
Okay.
No, it's 100%.
Okay,
If we
sweet. All
think
right,
about
the right question has now been asked.
Yeah. If you think about power, we have to look at the root where it starts. And typically it's leadership at the top of the hierarchy, or whoever has the most influence, or, we can get into the different types of power. But typically they have a lot of it. So we say this is going to be about you. You're where the root's going to start.
No matter
right?
what. Yeah. I love it.
Yeah. And a lot of times, especially the organizations we work with, it's not they have the greatest of intentions. Like, they want to have a positive impact. What we're trying to do with them is to become more aware of the gap that exists between those good intentions and then the actual impact that they are creating or being a part of.
I love that. Like, this isn't malicious. This isn't someone woke up and said, I'm going to abuse power and be shitty today. That's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about the sociopath leader, which is a small minutia, but it's there. People that have moved the needle corporately and just got elevated, even though they probably should be in some deep therapy somewhere. But I love what you said. These are good intentions. Between the good intentions and the gap of what's actually happening in the real world. I think that sets a much more positive with versus to theme on top of all that, right? Mm-hmm.
And Tyler, back to your theme in your book, what we find the common characteristic between those two personas we described is curiosity and a genuine curiosity.
And is there also, now I'm being self-serving because my own views, but that willingness to not be seen as the person with the magical answers, the book of all knowing. And do you also find, I guess, the type of industry, you mentioned the energy sector, highly, highly technical industry led by engineers, accountants, people that are data driven, they're analytical, they're structured. They've been typically rewarded in their career for their prowess of their technical skill. And now you move them into this world where elevating your team, lifting the people up around you, don't ask questions just because you already know what the answer is. You're trying to manipulate people into saying it because we all know what that feels like. That's got to be a huge unlearning for people, from legitimately giving everyone the benefit of the doubt that what got you here won't get you there, and overuse saying, but that must be just part of those initial conversations, like every single time, especially in Western Canada. But I guess most places, most of the world we live in, industrialization, manufacturing, they're technical roles that become leaders, right?
Yeah, we see that.
I mean, Jeff, I'd love
all the time.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
We see that phenomenon where a leader has to make that shift from individual expert with the answers to facilitator of conversations, whether those conversations are about strategic vision or priorities or how we work together. Once a leader takes on the role of, I actually don't have the answers and I need to get this team aligned, that's usually a shift when they start to look for the skills and the mindsets and the tools that we bring to the table to say, hey, we can help with that, because again, you're in a position of power. It's going to be a challenging lift for you, but there has to be some of that recognition that we don't actually have all the answers, but the team probably does. Right, the team and the customer, or the team and the rest of the organization, and it's that working collaboratively across and getting all the different perspectives. One of the questions we're always asking, and this is from my pal Steve DeGroot, who says, what do we know about this from their perspective? And when we ask leaders, what do you know about this from your team's perspective? Usually the answer is well, actually nothing. I probably don't know anything, and that's the very first step to acknowledge that we actually don't have the answers, and then we can go find them in a meaningful way.
I love you slipped the word customer in there. It was very nuanced. You just slipped it in quickly. It's not just the team. It's I've heard something from a lot of startups, don't fall in love with the problem, fall in love with your customer's version of the problem. If you're not curious or willing to go, hey, maybe my widget isn't the most magical widget in the history of the world because I actually didn't understand the problem the customer was going through. It does pull all the way through, especially in the age of disruption, when no matter what industry you're in, somebody's trying to eat your lunch. And if you can't offer the customer something in a way that shows you really empathize and connect with them and are legit curious about what they care about, someone can easily slip in and kind of take that market share from you. So I think it extends well beyond. When done well, it's got to pull all the way through right to the customer. Mm-hmm.
Another framing that we typically do with these groups is we kind of say, hey, you've got the tactical side of your leadership, right? Because you've learned those processes, those approaches, that way of doing that work. You got that. Let's focus on the relational side of leadership that will get in the way of that. And so by doing that shift, it feels like something new. because a lot of the times it's the relationships that get in the way of actually us getting things done. And so we can focus on that. And then we can talk about like rising to new levels of incompetency, right? And so people are...
that joke gets thrown around.
Yeah.
I'm assuming those first few meetings with you guys, when you start, they're nodding, but there's got to be a little bit of fear. Like you was word, like we're gonna park the tactical stuff. We're gonna focus on the soft side. We're gonna focus on relationships. And all of a sudden, the eyes get big and the fear and the fear meter goes up a little bit, which we don't want to let it show, because we've also been taught not to show that as leaders as well. It's another paradigm that I think that goes, bricks in the backpack as you carry that backpack around in your journey of leadership. How much is it? And again, something I was thinking about, if you're dealing with somebody who's at a COO or kind of a senior operational level, they've got a CEO, they have a board. How much now do the sandwich generation, right? Do they get sandwiched in the middle of like really wanting to facilitate maybe a younger team with a different culture, but yet they're still getting the same stuff thrown? Those rocks are still coming off the cliff, hitting them on the head. Like that's got to be a really tricky, just to really respect those sponsors, those supporting sponsors. They can get really sandwiched in the middle of a couple different cultures at the same time, I'm guessing. Thoughts?
Yeah,
and how do you guys navigate? How do you support them to navigate that, right?
Well, we start there. To be honest, we don't do work. Nice. Okay. We don't do work down the hierarchy or into the teams until we're confident, and the leader that we're working with is confident that they have the buy-in, support, and alignment with their up power. So we use up and down power just as a way to kind of map the power dynamic. And so we know that chief operating officer or even the CEO, they have a board they report to, they have shareholders, they have, we have to make sure that there's alignment. And so we do a project, and we're actually in the process of kicking some off right now called Foundations and Alignment with senior leadership teams. And so we work with that senior leader and the rest of the team. And really for us, it's also about disconnecting our work from that individual leader and making it about the team and the organization. Because otherwise, as a consultant, you can easily get positioned as HR's representative at the table, or whoever's sponsoring that work. And we run into the very same power dynamics that they run into, right? Because we're just an extension of them. And so our work is positioned as this is for the organization and for the team more than it's for any one individual. You're going to have some individual work to do, but this is about the collective we, the small we sitting around this table, not any one individual's agenda. And that's a good way to kind of ease some of that fear, because we're in it together. This isn't about pointing fingers and that, although we do get to that place of kind of specific feedback for individual leaders if they are misusing their power in a meaningful way. But it's positioned as it's a team effort, right? It's a team lift.
I really like you, like not becoming somebody's pet project, or like, oh, I'm bringing in this team to push my personal agenda forward. I'm hiring buy-in, right? I think that's very dangerous as well. Up and down power. Would that be, how does that compare to managing up or managing down as just a term that gets floated around quite a bit?
Yeah, I can take this one. I think managing comes with connotation. Managing for me, when I think about times I've had to manage up, it's felt like I'm manipulating up power to get my needs met, right? And so power can be used in all kinds of different ways. And we've all experienced power being used as manipulation, and power being used and getting like compliance. So I often talk about the difference between compliance and engagement, right? Do we want someone to comply with our demands or comply with our needs to get our needs met, regardless of what they care about and what they need? Or do we want them to engage meaningfully together? And do we want to have dialogue about something to move it forward? Or we have these competing agendas at the table? And so, there is an element of, we are using our power to affect change. That's the definition of power, which we haven't gotten to yet. But for the listener, power is just the ability to affect change.
Here we are, Jeff. We're here now. Okay, we're here.
It's the ability to affect change. That's it. Right. So pretty neutral, pretty simple definition. There's a bunch of different types of power. And so when you talk about managing up and down, we're often talking about role power, but often what we're leveraging is personal power. Like Jeff's personal power at the table, my charisma, my curiosity, my openness, my power in that moment to get what I want from someone. Usually we're having people lean on their personal power, but there's role power. Me as manager or COO, what comes with that role? What kind of decisions am I allowed to make and not allowed to make, right? What can I spend money? Can I not spend money? Like there's ways in which power gets used, right? And then we talk about status power, right? And status power is membership, right? And so I can't disentangle my identity and the fact that I'm a male, the fact that I speak English, the fact that I'm middle-aged, the fact that I'm married, all of these things are going to have an impact on my relationships with other people. And so, Tyler, you're experiencing Pablo and I in our personal power, in our role power as guests, and as co-CEOs of the Ally Co, and in our status power as men living in the society we live in, right? And then we get into collective and systemic power, and we get kind of away from the individual. But even at the individual level, we're all navigating the intersection of power. and then trying to figure out, how do I use this to get my needs met? At the end of the day, that's probably what we're using power for, is just to get our needs met, whatever they happen to be.
It's funny. A good friend of mine just had a new baby. And if you want to watch an entity, a being that's very good at getting its needs met, it's impressive to watch. They jump those parents. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah. My gracious. So, we've been learning it since the get-go. Like, these are the two beings in my life that I need everything from. Oh, I will learn how to navigate these two like there's no tomorrow. And I'm watching it and it's very joyful, but it kind of brings me back. So I hear a few different things. One, you talked about charisma, those outward thinkers. Maybe the three of us might fall into that category. With my wife, likes to think about things and talk about later. Like, that immediately creates that, oh, the extroverts always get what they want because they talk and they're smooth and they can be outgoing in the meeting. Then I also heard the concept, so let's touch on that a little bit. The ability to affect change. And immediately made me think about agency. I've done some work on myself, and I realized the second I feel I've lost agency, I become 12-year-old Tyler, and it's not pretty. Because 12-year-old Tyler uses 50-year-old Tyler's resources and causes a huge disaster. I'm like, that was an outsized response. But if you think about that in a dynamics of a boardroom environment, all those things are still at play, right? The messiness that we are as individuals still shows up. And how do you guys tread the line between coach, counselor, and judge and jury sometimes in these settings, right? When you get brought in and everyone sees you come in and has a different story about who just showed up in the room, right?
Yeah, we do have a strategy to our approach, which is to actually get to know people before we dive into. So a lot of our work follows.
Sounds very wise, Pablo.
Follows.
Well, we've learned the hard way.
Yeah, we've learned. It's similar.
Don't you
to
find
the
most
design.
wisdom comes from that, tripping and falling? It does for me, anyway.
Yeah.
Sorry, I cut you off.
No. 100%. We call it the first D of our model is discovery, and really that's about practicing compassionate curiosity. It's about asking real powerful questions in a safe environment that really get us into meaningful dialogue, and through this process, deep listening, right? Being aware of our biases. When we hear something, we right away want to respond to it, kind of put that away. So I think I'll give you an example. We have surveys that we use as part of that discovery work, 360s, or employee experience surveys. Before we do any of that, we actually dive into workshops with folks that are going to be requesting the feedback, processing it, and providing it. And we actually go through the process of, how do we make this meaningful, right? How do we become more aware of our assumptions and our biases and the stories we tell each other? So that's one piece. And then once we have the feedback, we make sense of it together. We don't go off in a room as consultants and come back and say, this is truth. This is what's happening.
These are our findings.
Exactly.
Pay me for the report, and we can check the engagement box because we sent out a survey.
100%.
And I'm calling that out because I've seen that done wrong. I did it wrong earlier in the year. I had a good friend of mine who's a senior HR consultant. She's like, if you ever send out a survey without doing this pre-work, we're not going to be friends anymore. So I really appreciate that you talk about these are all tools, but they often get misused and mislabeled. Like, we're going to do an engagement survey because that'll help engagement. I would argue it'd probably have the opposite effect, right?
Pushes the needle the wrong way.
Yeah.
But
we talk about empty calories. Don't do all this work.
I like that.
Right?
Empty calories. Empty calories. We're not getting any fitter because we're eating junk.
Right. Exactly.
How is that just become for so many companies? Sorry, Jeff, go ahead. I'm just going to, why is that so the default? Well, then I'll let you kind of unpack it.
Yeah. Why is that the default? I think there's some inertia around it. I think it's just that we've always done it that way, and a lot of teams are firefighting, right? And it's like, oh, suddenly it's June, so it's time to send out the employee engagement survey. So we don't question it. We just hit rinse and repeat. So I think there's that kind of spaciousness to design something different. And I think a lot of teams are really busy. And this is, again, if you're working on the downstream side of the power dynamic, you're working with chronic burnout. You're working with unhealthy conflict and artificial harmony on your teams. You're working with retention issues. You're working with, grievances and people on stress leaves. Like, you're kind of on the receiving end of misuses of power. And so our work really is in that more strategic, proactive place, getting teams there and saying, hey, if we actually did this differently, it would impact this outcome. But if you're stuck dealing with those outcomes, whether you're the people and culture team or HR or a senior leader in an organization, it's really hard to carve out the space to be proactive. And that can be a lot of our work, is to come in and take that burden and say, hey, we can do those. We can have those conversations and come back to the table with you and your team. And you probably can't even have the conversations that we're having anyway, because of the relationship and the dynamic that's been created. And so there's a little bit of that, dance floor, back to the dance floor metaphor. I often tell leaders you can't read the label from inside the jar, and you're in the jar. So
one of my favorite sayings, Jeff. As a marketing agency, we encounter very similar. Nobody cares about this part of our business. I'm like, wait a second, what? It's so often that comes out. Is there, thinking about microcosms versus the whole universe? So you work with one of the largest energy producers in the world. 10,000, 20, I don't know what their team. Is there a good size for starting? If it takes more than 2 pizzas, it's 20 people. If it's more than 120, it switches to a different kind of culture and social dynamic. Is there a size that works well to start planting these seeds inside your organization in terms of like how many people around the table are the most effective for creating this kind of change and then scaling from there? Or am I being too prescriptive with even the question?
We can tell you what we've seen over the last 5 years.
You know what? You can't argue with it. In my experience, which is the best way to start any argument.
I think it's definitely about having the right people in the room. And so typically that will be based on title, role, who's the sponsor of this work.
Getting that first tier set up for success, like you said. Okay.
And often, though, it also includes folks that just have a lot of personal power within, whether they've been there a long time, whether they're just that natural leader who didn't want the title and the responsibility. So for us,
but yet they have the most people following them sometimes.
Exactly, right? If they leave, everybody's leaving, right?
Yeah.
So one of our first jobs is to really get to understand the system and the power dynamics that exist there. And then we can make usually what happens is we always leave some contingency because in discovery things surface that no one knew about.
100%.
And sometimes we're like, how the hell did you not know about this? Right. And sometimes they knew about it, but they were hoping it wasn't what it was. But you do have
the power of outside the bottle, right? Or I like above the dance floor, because if you stand long enough, you can start to see the dynamics of who's confident, who's not. Like I like the dance floor balcony metaphor, because that would be a good little, that's an experiment you do in that first year of psych class at university where they always publish those little studies, and that would be that feels like it could be a really interesting one that could be replicated pretty consistently.
Well, so number wise, it's typically like 2 to 6 are the initial folks we're starting with. So whether it's a senior leadership, pretty tight senior, like that foundation and alignment work that Jeff was talking about, that has to start there. If we're going to be operationalizing our power in a very specific way with certain behaviors, and we want everybody to exhibit these behaviors, well, the spotlight's on this group.
Yeah.
Right. So what is this group
leading by example isn't the best way. It's the only way to re-quote a quote I've quoted way too many times.
No, it's true. Right. And usually what we realize is they think they're aligned, but they haven't really they don't have the same understanding or interpretation of certain words that are their core values.
Lost language.
The behaviors aren't aligned. And the most important one for me anyways is they haven't called out what the do not do behaviors are. And the same thing goes for when they do these surveys and come back with all this feedback. They say, we're going to do this, but they never say what they're not going to do. And people expect that thing.
It's so funny because psychologically we result to loss aversion or the fear or like a headline of something negative. But yet in corporate values, we're always trying to move towards the good, but never being really clear of what we're moving away from or what are non-negotiables. Because I have my business partner, and if he was on the call, I'd say it. If I did that, he'd be like, "Oh, we're being kind of negative. I don't like that. I want to be positive."
Yeah.
And it's because he just sees the world that way. Where I'm like, well, the positives will take care of themselves a little bit. Let's just stop lighting this place. Let's stop lighting these relationships on fire.
Yeah.
But I find that we like to put the rose-colored glasses on when it comes to that kind of stuff.
100%.
I like that. That's I'm going to ask another. I know it's a ridiculous question. How long does it take?
How long does what take?
Exactly. Touche, my friend. Touche. For the engineers and accountants that are in leadership roles, be like, all right, well, if I implement this, what's my workflow look like? What's my Gantt chart look like? Is this 6 months to land it? It's a ridiculous question. I'm aware, but I'm thinking about who might be listening.
Yeah, I mean, I
Jeff,
can take a quick stab at it because we're looking at, first we have to really get clear about the desired impact. And so that foundations and alignment work is often getting clear on what's our desired future state, what's the impact that we're after, what's the current state, and what actually is the gap and how might we close it. And then we work with teams. So after discovery, we call it definition or defining, right? We define the desired outcome and we define the behaviors that we need. And then we move into design, right? And if you're familiar with design thinking, it's designing the how might we, asking those questions. How might we close this gap? How might we improve engagement in this way? How might we smooth out this friction in between these two teams or whatever it happens to be? And then from there, delivery. That, the fourth D is delivery. And that can look like workshops and trainings and facilitations and one-on-one coaching and team coaching and, sometimes process change or shifts or organizational restructuring. Like more often than I can probably count, we come in and realize that we've actually outgrown, or like our desired impact has outgrown the current organizational structure and maybe some of the skill sets that are around the table. And so we have to look at roles and we have to look at restructuring. We have to look at those things. That's not always the case, but sometimes it is. And so, but if we jump into, too often what happens is the leader's already defined the issue, right? It's Bob. Yeah. And he needs coaching. And so we hire a coach to come in and work directly with Bob. And like, it's never Bob, or it's never just Bob, right? It's always the other pieces. So how long that takes really depends on how big the gap is and how much effort we want to put into closing it. And so an example with that energy company was around one team with psychological safety. And it was a new team that had formed and come together, people from all over the organization to form this new team. And the leader was being very proactive and said, I want to get a pulse on psychological safety, what they're coming in the door with based on their experiences so far in the organization. So we did a psychological safety kind of baseline survey, and unsurprisingly found that the experience between the men and the women on the team was dramatically different. And that women had a 30, 40 point lower experience across the board on their psychological safety in the organization.
So like in that case, would you say, and I don't want to be right or wrong, I'm using the words right or wrong kind of loosely, but was that the right read? Was that the right place to start? Or was it just the place that the leader understood, was aware of psych safety, goes, yeah, I think that this is a good baseline. And then it unfolded from there. Like, was that a strong jump off point in that case? It sounds like it revealed something pretty clear.
Yeah, I mean, I think when we look at psychological safety, we look at the 4 different types of psychological safety. When we look at kind of challenger safety being the ultimate thing we're after, people are able to speak truth to power, and we want learning safety. You can put your hand up and say, I made a mistake. That's a pretty good foundational starting place for a lot of teams, would be to say, what is the current state of that? Because performance is really dependent on psychological safety. And so anyway, we started there, saw the gap, very clear gap, and the leader had some homework. How are we going to tackle this? And so it was a combination of effort and rehabilitation and kind of some clear do and don't behaviors that they decided on as a team. Because also we don't just give that to the leader and say, hey, you've got a problem, right? That conversation is happening in the room with everyone who filled out that survey, right? And we're saying, let's make meaning of this together, and let's decide as a team, how do we want to action this? How do we want to move this forward? It's a great way
to demonstrate what psychological safety could look like by using the thing you're actually working on, right?
And that's really what we're trying to do with all of our work, is model the power dynamic, the healthy use of power, right? Which is, transparency is a big piece of that, like not hiding and hoarding information. And so let's put it on the table and say,
hiding and hoarding.
Yeah, you all know this exists. Like, you are the ones who filled this survey out. Why would we hide the results from you? Like, let's talk about it. Let's put it up on the board and let's talk about it. And 6 months later, we redid the survey and we basically closed the gap between men and women, and everybody was a little bit higher than the last time, right? And so again, we share that back and we say, what made the biggest differences, like, for you? And when they started to tell stories of experiences they had in meetings with each other, right? And senior leadership and how they showed up. And so we got we saw the gap and then we closed the gap, right? But that doesn't mean you're done, because now what's next for that team? And so that, how long does it take? It depends on the size of the gap, and it depends on the willingness and effort of the team, and how much work they put in to doing that. Pablo, you might
just
have some thoughts
to add
too.
to that. Well, I just wanted to say it's not this beautiful upline, by the way. We want to be open about that.
Yeah.
What
Sometimes
happens
it gets
is,
worse.
Do you guys mean humans are messy? What? Is that true?
if we've done a good job, we're going to surface unspoken tension, unhealthy tension and conflict. We call it artificial harmony, where, I'll give you an example, especially we see this with younger generations or people midway in their career to make a move and they're like, oh, this is way better than my last place. I'm not going to rock the boat. This is good enough, right? Yeah. But you lose that healthy aspect of tension and conflict that drives innovation and new ideas. So what we see is, if we do a good job of really asking powerful questions, practicing deep listening, and focusing on the things that are the most important, people start sharing more. So you might have a little dip because that's where you were actually in reality.
Yeah, I
right?
like that. Well, because as a little bit more as trust increases, honesty comes, like, stuff. The dirty laundry gets put out on the line, right?
There you go. Yeah.
Exactly. How challenging is that? Just thinking about the. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead, Jeff.
No, and for us, it's like all data is useful. Like there's no right or wrong. There's no good or bad. There's a story. And usually we just look at the data and we're like, oh my goodness, something's wrong. And we run off and try and make a bunch of changes to our organization instead of saying, again, what do we know about this data from the perspective of the people who gave it to us? Probably nothing. And it might be, actually, I feel safer. So I answered this honestly this time. It's like, oh my goodness, like what a win, right? To get real data but we might look at that. If we're just looking at the data, it looks like things got worse. So we're going to go fire some leaders, right? Or reorg the organization or whatever it looks like.
Yeah. Things actually got more honest. We actually found out what was actually the instrumentation started working properly. How challenging is that for you guys as a business coming in and unearthing more? And like that can be the challenge. Like that's often why it's called discovery, because you're like, oh wow, this is what I thought was going on. Sometimes for organizations though, I'm everyone's busy, everyone's under fire, everyone has limited time, limited resources, everyone's doing more with less. All those cliche things are true. How is that navigating? And I guess it's all about how you set up that champion and that layer of champion when you kind of start. But that's got to be really challenging to like, oh God, okay. Shit, we only set aside this kind of bandwidth, but we actually need this. That's got to be a real challenge for organizations. And I'm being very empathetic that everybody's overwhelmed in whatever that means to you. It's probably true in some way, right? This can also be really overwhelming.
Yeah, we realize that. And so when you look at our approach, the first thing we tell them is what we set out to do will probably not happen. What we are going to do is if we follow this process, we will become better at asking questions and having meaningful dialogue so that we can give purposeful direction. And so we always leave room for that agility in our engagements. What will that cost them? Time. Will it frustrate us a bit? Yeah, sure. Because we want to help them. But again, we're doing work with them, not to them. And so to answer your earlier question, we're always as a business thinking of how can we show them progress as fast as possible. And so any type of learning and development that we need to do has to be practical and easy to implement right away so that we can continue to get feedback on that. So that's our goal, is like within a month to 2 months, that foundations and alignment work, and we're off to delivering. With some of our larger organizational clients, we are operational with them. We've identified areas of their business where they have maybe low awareness blind spots, the skills that they want to develop. And then the willingness is up to them. And you say busyness, it's for us, if it's not a priority, it's not a priority. Just own that.
Yeah. And be honest about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so funny. I used to do fitness coaching years ago, personal training, and I do some nutrition stuff, and people come in and be like, oh, you know what? I just didn't have time this week. I was too busy. I'm like, it's okay. You can just say it wasn't important enough. And people got really resistant, but it is important. I'm like, well, then, and I always used to make the same joke. I was like, when you're really busy in the morning, no matter how short of time you are, do you always brush your teeth? They're like, well, yeah, obviously. I'm like, yeah, because it's important enough. They're like, oh, shut up, screw you. And then we used to joke about it. But for people to say out loud, it just wasn't a priority this week because other things were more important. It's so easy to make the excuse of, well, I didn't have time. Which is true. And you also didn't make it important. And you know what? That doesn't make you a villain. It's okay. But totally. it was a tough paradigm for people to want to admit that, because somehow it was admitting something that was going against this new version of them that they wanted to be seen as the fitness person or the person who worked out or whatever. But they weren't really there yet. They were still on the curve, right? I had a flashback of coaching back in the day. So sorry.
No, I was going to say it's a big piece of our work, and it's tough. Like we fall, like it's, try to do it without judgment. It's tough, right? I think we constantly feel judged. There's this idea of who we think we are, and then how people actually experience us. The stories we tell. Exactly. And so I'll give you an example. So, some of our surveys that we do, we don't give scores. Like, who wants to be scored? What we do is variances. The difference between how you think you show up versus how people experience you. And there's differences in that. And so a lot of our work is really about getting to understanding, but then it's in your power for how you want to respond. You don't have to respond to all of this. You can choose what you want to respond to.
Well, you're immediately demonstrating giving them agency and personal power, right?
Exactly.
Back to what you said earlier. For you guys building this business, it's very hands-on. You're clearly passionate about it. I say hands-on because I hear the words you use and the way you talk. You're invested, you're bought in. Building this business, has that been challenging to scale? Has that been the challenge? Has it been getting companies to actually leave the time aside? I'm always curious, as we're all building, struggling. You two also have low time and lots of demands in your life. How's it been building the business? What's been some of the challenges? Is it the buy-in, or is it just enough of all of you to go around?
Now we're
Have
getting
you been
into the
reading our
very human
emails?
part of this. Tyler.
Have you been reading our emails?
No, I had my AI read it just to give me a summary, but I don't believe everything I read online. I try not to.
Yes, no, that's fair. Yeah, I mean, we're also navigating power dynamics with Pablo and I and the rest of the team, and we're also figuring out that how do we prioritize this work in and amongst, we're fathers and our wives are both psychologists and they have thriving practices, and we've got life, and so how do we prioritize? How do we we talk about drinking our own champagne or eating your own dog food, whatever that metaphor is, right? We want to make sure that that's alive for us too, and so when it comes to scaling, I think mostly, and this is maybe me personally, I think about scaling our impact, right? How do we actually have a deeper, broader impact in the world? And that, we've got a few different things that we do to try and drive that. One of them is a new spin-off business. It's a community membership offering with some mutual friends, with people we know together. And so we can talk a little bit about that. But when it comes to the Ally Co. and the work, we've recently realized that our work is best done at deeper depths than traditional work. And so fewer clients, deeper work is probably where we're heading as a business. And, we've got some trusted advisors and coaches and team facilitators and folks that come alongside us to do that work. It's not just Jeff and Pablo, but it is, it's really, for me, it's about the impact and scaling that. But, we're probably not going to be a McKinsey anytime soon or a Deloitte. Like that's probably not the growth ambition here, but we want to do the work
that's okay, because the world's got a McKinsey, the world's got a Deloitte, the world maybe needs a little more what you guys have to offer, but that's my own bias right there.
Yeah. And selfishly, we wanted to, we tried scaling in different ways. And recently we realized it's easy for us to, when we get in, and this was the goal. The strategy was get in with something people understand, and then show them this whole new world, right? And then it's easy to get pulled into different areas and say, oh, we should have a team member that does this and this and that. And we just started to just get pulled really thin. And it was impacting our relationships, inside and outside of work. And so we really pulled everything back to focus on two things. And one, we mentioned this foundations and alignment work, really focusing on those senior leaders, executives, boards, people that have a huge impact on a large amount of folks, starting there. And then, we've got enough folks that are now coming through the co who can develop those skill sets, who then can help with maybe like management level and out as this healthy virus starts to go through the organization.
The healthy virus.
Yeah. And then the other portion is helping teams to meaningfully operationalize any learning and development they do, to put it into action, into their priorities, their initiatives. Redesigning onboarding, for example, is one we've been asked to come in and do. Okay, so we've learned how to be more aware of this thing and have these skill sets. How might that show up for how we recruit, hire, and onboard folks?
Which to me is great. You got to go right to the origin, right? And start there.
Exactly.
Hire for it, and then disclose, overshare. I say overshare. I had a politician tell me that once your audience gets annoyed, they're finally listening. I think sometimes when you're onboarding, you've got to just really be clear. And then you have to actually do what you said you were going to do in the onboarding document, which is another whole problem. I see this says on the wall, but that's not what showed up in that meeting, right? I think that inconsistency is very painful for people.
It makes me very... The crux of it often is we say this, but we do that. And there's a tension there, and then people are going to do what we do. That's often the gap that we're closing. It's a behavioral gap, right? Yeah.
And to your point, a lot of times you're bringing awareness to it. You're giving permission to even talk about it. You're giving it a voice. You're giving it a name. You're calling it something. When I think it was one of the Brené Brown books, I'm not a huge fan, but one of her books, Atlas of the Heart, where she's like, how do you understand your emotions if most people can't even name them? And I was like, what? You're a little too trendy for me, but that's a really good point. I can't argue with you on that one.
Fair point.
And it was great the way she just broke down. And so often in a boardroom environment, like, oh, you're acting a certain way. Well, no, I'm not. But what did you mean by what did you mean? Where the lost language is so real, especially when it comes to what triggers us.
Well, I don't know if this is your saying, Jeff, but I always think about, and because we like to create our own models and frameworks to make sense of things.
Yep.
But Jeff has this, and I want to maybe butcher it, but it's all models and frameworks are flawed. Some are helpful. We draw from
it's a great
the
quote
things that can help us. Yeah.
Wasn't it one individual who made that quote and it just keeps getting resurfaced? I forget. I've heard it more often than not lately, and I love it. I love it, actually.
I heard it from a systems professor at Royal Roads years ago. All models are flawed, some are useful. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's so, because as everyone tries to sell you on their perfect model, right? Because that's part of the marketing. Like, we've figured it out. We've 30-day apps. How about 29-minute apps? How about that? It's like, I've got a model, I've got a system, right?
I'm down to 6-minute apps, Tyler, every morning.
Okay. That tells me your nutrition is also tight, Pablo. It's tight. No one's getting, no one, what's the old joke? I got a 6-pack, but the fridge door is closed. Like, 6-packs, more about your diet than how many sit-ups you do. Power Dynamics, co-CEO. Talk to me about the power dynamics. Like, is there a chart? Is there a whiteboard somewhere? Or is it one of those balls of yarn with all the strings of how it all ties together? How do you guys manage your power dynamics? Because the co-CEO role is very interesting. I've seen it succeed. I've seen it fail. Most consultants will be like, ooh, co-CEO, and kind of put their head down and nod when they hear it. How have you guys managed your power dynamics? That must be a huge part of your success.
Jeff, you go first. Then we'll see.
Sure.
I already see it shaping up, Pablo. I see it shaping up.
We just defer to each other. We're just like, you take that one. No, you take that one. And somebody eventually takes it. No, actually there was 3 of us. There was 3 founding partners at the Allied Co. A year or 2 in, Kimberly ended up going to Deloitte. I think she's at Deloitte at the leadership lab there. And we've always had a co-CEO-ish model, or multiple folks at the table. So the upside of that, the positive side of that, organizationally and for ourselves and for our clients is distributing power and having accountability baked into your system, right? A lot of the challenges of leadership and misuses of power is that the people with the most power are the least accountable to it. And so having a co-CEO, someone with the same level of power, you automatically set up a bit of an accountability mechanism for, hey, you said you're going to do that thing, and I can hold you accountable because I'm your peer. Right? Leaders that don't have peer accountability often have to rely on personal accountability, and mine varies. I'm sure all of ours varies a little bit, right? Speaking of abs, right? Jeff has not worked on his abs for a while because personally he's not been accountable to it. Right? So the positive side of accountability, we get to leverage the expertise and the insights and the strengths that we bring to the table. It has, from my perspective, it's constantly being negotiated. It's negotiated on a probably a more frequent basis than a typical CEO role would be evaluated. We're renegotiating roles and redefining them. I don't know, Pablo, every 6 months, probably in the last 5 years. We probably renegotiated 10 or a dozen times, and then right down to sometimes weekly. It's like, actually, you're going to take this thing.
You're literally doing it right now. You're literally doing it right now in real time.
Literally negotiating who's going to answer Tyler's questions in real time. And so, there's probably some friction that comes with that. Right. And as someone who defaults to being autonomous, right, I have a very strong agency driver, Tyler. So when you say agency, I'm like, yeah, I'm with you. Right. Give me agency, give me autonomy. It slows me down. Right. It has to. And so there's probably been some friction with that. And Pablo on the other side, I can say confidently, he's collaborative. Right. He loves to collaborate. Right. And so you've got that kind of tension and paradox, which is a great, healthy thing because I can move.
Well, back to what you said earlier, like tension and friction is healthy. Yeah.
The paradox, and it's a continuum, right? And we talk a lot about power being on continuums, and so Pablo and I, on a few continuums, are probably on opposing sides and opposing forces, which organizationally is great because it gets a better perspective, a more well-rounded look at what are we actually trying to build, what kind of experience are we trying to drive for clients. It really, again, so it's it's accountability, it's broader perspective, but it for sure comes with it some nuances, and when there's conflict and tension and all those things that you have to work through. That when you're the one with the power, you might not have to do that as frequently.
Well, it's back to the old James Bond movies where they always had the 2 keys to turn the nuclear, you know what I mean? And you couldn't reach both keys at the same time. There's some logic behind that, right? And I heard you say loud and clear, you have coaches, you have mentors, you have external advisors. You're not rowing this boat alone. You get external viewpoints. And I think back to the idea of like, I need to wake up today and all of a sudden be in this new role and have all the answers, and how ridiculous that is. But yet sometimes it's still a story we have told ourselves as leaders, I think, who grow up in that autonomous, you got to fight all the bad guys and climb all the mountains by yourself to be a hero. And it's just not, it's not real. And I don't think it's effective either.
Yeah. And I think for me, that structure really speaks to equity. And evolving equity. And so Jeff mentioned we're both married to psychologists. And
I heard that. I noted. I wasn't sure what question to ask to fit that, but I'd probably just leave it alone.
What question do I ask about
that? What we love, or what I love about the co-CEO relationship is that at any moment in our lives, each of us is going through life outside of work. And it allows us to step in for each other at those moments in time.
Yeah.
And so, when you think about this world, and especially about like we work with a lot of the majority of women leaders.
Okay.
And so this ability to share and distribute power and to create equitable playing fields so that they can really, have that level to grow their careers without having to sacrifice for other life decisions. They can share that together. And so that structure also can help to create that equitable foundation. Right. And so we use that as fathers that really want to be spending time with their children. And we both have 3 dogs, so they need attention too. Right. So, and we have
my dog just strolled into the room behind me and she's decided to take a nap. So that's good. That's good.
So it allows us to navigate, this is the difference between balance and harmony, work-life balance and harmony. Balance, I always equate it with this fatigue because you're constantly trying to keep that plate spinning on the stick. Whereas on this co-CEO-ship journey, we just have this harmony that ebbs and flows. And because of the awareness and skill we have to navigate tension, when it gets there, we can find our way out of it.
And I love it. It's not about avoiding the tension. It's not about going, it's never going to go wrong or we're never going to disagree. We're going to agree all the time. But because we have rapport, we have trust, we have psych safety, we have the things, and we work on ourselves, whatever that looks like for everyone as an individual, you got to get curious about yourself first and where like, I got really triggered. I wonder where that came from. Oh, maybe it's because I felt I lost agency. And that is all the point of, time doesn't solve all. It does if you work at it. And if you start to observe, and I always joke, being in a good business partnership, I've been in a, my business partner, I was his client in 2003 and we've been working together ever since. So we're literally married. And I always joke, no matter what, we don't always agree. We're completely different individuals, but we're still going to be partners on Monday. So we figure it out, right? It's like, I'm married. I'm not dating and I can just leave. We're going to figure this out and we're going to work through it. And I think that's where you actually yield the long-term benefit, but putting my own experience on top of that, filter a little bit, but
no, I love to
I have 2 marriages, my marriage and then my business marriage. No question. And if he was on the call, I'd make the same joke because he would nod and laugh as well.
Well, we feel you. I'd say we would say the same thing. And you know what? It's what I was thinking about it. It's so simple. It's not mind blowing, but we share meals together. We share that's the connecting point. we sit around a table and we have real conversations and we're able to dive deep. It's a relationship that I love. So. Dude, I love a little love bomb in the call. It's got to be so interesting though to work with these organizations and see things and learn things and go like, oh wow, yeah, like, hey, let's make sure we don't do that. Or wow, I actually see I think we got a piece of that. Like it's an interesting, like it's, you get to take your work home with you a little bit. I think that's a huge benefit. Selfishly, I joked again, back to being personal trainer. I loved it because I got to experiment and do all these exercises. I loved working out and I got to share it with people, but I was always experimenting with what worked, what didn't work. So selfishly, I got a lot out of it. And I would imagine this work can be incredibly rewarding in terms of what you can bring back to your own organization. So you hit an important part of what our work is about. And probably the secret underlying mission Jeff and I have is that this work leaks into the family, into the home, into friendships and community. The stories people bring back as they've practiced, like what we are doing is part of just the human experience of relationship and leadership. And so the stories people bring back, I'll give you an example. I actually had my mother do part of my 360.
Wow, that just seems like, wow, I'm kind of blown away. That's like what a risky but awesome idea.
I was so nervous. I was like, this is stupid. She's not going to be able to make sense of it. But I'd always felt like there was something missing. Like we have a good relationship, but there were certain things we avoided talking about. Yep. And this allowed me, and I just didn't feel that spiritual connection to her that I wanted. So yes, our work, I think that's the secret like sauce and virus that we are after, is that this will leak into people's lives and help them become, more conscious fathers, friends, and so forth.
What changed after your mom did your 360? I can't let you leave that one sitting on the table.
What it was, so there's cultural things. My mom's from France. There's a lot of face and just like, you wouldn't even talk about going to see a psychologist because something's wrong with you.
Of course.
So there's this level of vulnerability you're afraid to share because of being judged. And so my mom and I were holding back on diving into the things that were really bothering us underneath, getting in the way. Why were we arguing about things? Was it really about this thing? Or was it because we hadn't got to that level of safety? So being able to just surface something that happened without my mom feeling guilt about it.
Yeah.
Right? Because no one wants to feel guilty, especially as parents, right? That I might have had an impact on you that wasn't great.
Yeah.
Right. But when we realize, when you realize that actually now that we've talked about it, I feel so much better and closer to you.
Oh, that's a great story.
Yeah.
And you touched on something I think really important as well. How much culture plays a huge impact as we become more diversified, more dynamic, people from everywhere working together. So you're showing up with different core beliefs right out of the gate, let alone your own individual stories and what you tell yourself. And as the larger the organization and the more of a global reach, and I think it's great. Calgary's becoming a little bit, I moved here from Montreal, Toronto, which were incredibly diverse environments. You know, you get on a bus and it's you and 17 other cultures represented on that bus, just by what you can see. And I'm very limited, not even having conversations. I moved to Calgary. I was like, oh, this place is pretty white. That was 20 some years ago. Calgary's a lot more dynamic now, but that has a huge impact on our workforce. And I'm assuming 100%. You guys run into that all the time of like, oh, wow, we're at a cultural, where we grew up and what we saw going on level. And that's not easy work when it's hardwired into the mainframe.
Yeah. That's why that piece about deep listening, to really get to meaningful dialogue, making sure we're talking about the same thing and understanding. Oh, when you say that word, honesty, you know, for you, it's like here's an example with my wife. She's like, you don't have to tell me everything you're thinking, because some of that is hurtful, right? So I know you're trying to be honest and that's how you show me you love me, but you're being like really direct and telling me things that like you don't understand how those impact me, right? Like things like in another life.
It reminds me of a sitcom, like it was Three's Company. Now I'm dating myself, where like one of the main characters decided he was only going to tell the truth. Like, how do I look in this dress? You actually look like you gained. And the whole episode was exactly what you just described.
Right? Yeah. Right. And in their mind, I'm giving you everything of me, you know, and in other people's mind, like, no, you're being a jerk. Right. So
I think there's a lot of power in like take responsibility and have respect for what you say and how you say it and who you say it to. And if it's not valuable or it might, you know, cause that person, or how do you set up an environment where that is not just you spewing off? As someone who, like, I joke, I grew up in Quebec with French culture that was very in your face. I moved to Alberta and I was like, whoa, I had to walk it back a bit, because it was closing more doors than it was opening. And like, sometimes I faulted people here going, well, if you have an issue with me, please tell me. Don't tell 6 people around me. Well, in Quebec, you just come right at the person, but then you'd resolve it and have a glass of wine after. Where I had to relearn that culture. That was 25 years ago. But my freight train direct in your face, which I was like, well, that's how I grew up. It was a story I was justifying to kind of be a dick sometimes.
Well, that's a really I had to get it under control. That recognition that when you have power in a relationship, you are also responsible for the impact of it. Oftentimes we unintentionally blame people in a down power position for how they react or respond to our misuses of power. Such a common, easy trap to fall into. It's a shadow side of having power, is the leader will sit there and they'll point to their team and say, they're disengaged. And it's like, well, what are you doing that's driving disengagement? Like, how are you complicit in creating the conditions for that? Because ultimately that's your responsibility. And that goes for fatherhood and being a husband and being a son, and like all of the places we have to look at what's the impact that I can create in this relationship? How much power do I truly have? And so power awareness is really the first step in that journey, is understanding what is the kind of impact that I can make. I'll be honest, when I went to right use of power training with Dr. Cedar Barstow down in Boulder, I came back after a week of intensive, like 40 hours of like digging into power dynamics and our beliefs around power. And I walked in the front door and I saw my wife holding our newborn son. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. It was like, oh my goodness, like I have so much power in that relationship. And you have to have that level of awareness and consciousness of like, what is the true nature of the impact I can create, and then not hide behind our good intentions. Because good intentions are great. We all have them. We show up, you know, we haven't met the leader yet that wakes up wanting to drive disconnection and disharmony and conflict in mistrust. Like
typically not. Yeah.
Typically not, right? Typically we wake up wanting to have a positive impact, and somewhere along the course of our day, we send the terrible email that gets misinterpreted or misread or whatever, or we say the thing flippantly, right? Or we think we're being candid, but we're actually just being jerks, right? So it's one of those things that the responsibility has to lie with the person with power to track their impact and then respond to negative uses or misuses of it. And that's a big shift around when we talk about responsibility and accountability to the power that we have.
Years ago, I was taking an NLP course, not natural language processing, but neuro-linguistic programming. And one of the things that always stuck with me, and I've tried and I work at it because I slip and I come back to it, is the meaning of your communication is the result that it gets. If that person reacts poorly, you can't blame them. You have to go, because I'm not changing, especially as a leader. And I work on that because it slips. And it's like, oh, I wish I'm like, nope, be careful with the shoulds, be careful with the theys, be careful with the, why did you, that's not what I meant. And then that other side where someone will bring something up, like, yeah, a week ago we had that meeting, you said that thing and you can't even remember that you said it, but yet they've been carrying it around for a week. Like that shadow side, you mentioned the word shadow and some of that Jung's work around that of, oh, I never act that way. Yet 5 people were like, you always freaking act that way. Like that's some tough stuff, right? Like that's some tough stuff. Or like, oh, I'm completely unaware of that, but that's the responsibility we take on as leaders, is to become aware of those things.
Yep.
And they're probably going to be a little uncomfortable at first, or the uncomfortable ones might be uncomfortable.
For sure.
Maybe mine was I'm closing more doors than I'm opening. Maybe I leave Tyler from Quebec in Quebec, and maybe I have a Tyler from Alberta, persona that needs to emerge. And that's also the joy of being like, hey, I was 25, 26. Time has passed. I've paid attention, and hopefully things have evolved. And a couple rough 360s back in 2017, 2018 were the catalyst for me, for sure. Back to your point about feedback and going, yeah, this isn't working out. It's hard not to internalize it when I listen to you guys talk, because we're if you're paying attention, we're all on the journey, right? That's the beauty of it.
For sure. And I think what we see too with some of these leaders is, and Jeff speaks to this really well, is a lot of the times there's these good intentions, but there's this story that they've been told that leaders need to show up in this way. And you can see that struggle internally of their values bending, and the cost is when it breaks. And so I'm an example of, being there and doing these things that I'm told I need to do to be successful as a leader. The shoulds. But when my value broke, as a man, I'm terrible at reading feeling. And so what ended up happening is I got really sick internally. The cost was my health. Yeah. But I can't tell you how many folks, especially men, that are at that level that are now on their second or third marriage or having heart problems. There's a cost to not listening, to not really figuring out what is it underneath there, your core values, and how do you operationalize those.
And let's be honest, it shows up in our society oftentimes as self-medicating through alcohol and a lot of things that can be like, oh no, I'm into wine. I'm like, you're a low-grade alcoholic. I'm really into vintage cocktails. I'm like, dude, you're drinking every day, man.
Relabel, yeah.
And then it goes into other areas that become, even more destructive. But, the concept of self-medicating when you're not aligned with self, it's really prevalent in our society and often celebrated in ways that it actually should be like, man, do you need a hug? Like, do you need a cookie? Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
So I came to this work through addiction and mental health. So I spent about a dozen years working with youth and the families. It's a family therapy program. And so, I look into society and like addiction is very prevalent, right? Addictive behaviors, whether it's substance use or lots of other things. And we used to say that control is the master addiction, right? We don't like how we feel inside, and so we want to gain control of that. And so we look externally and we start to bring in whether that's a substance or whether that's a behavior, or whether that's power as a CEO to control the outcome of a deal or whatever it happens to be. But control becomes kind of that master addiction. And what do we use power for? Power can show up as control. And so then we start to leverage our power to gain control, to get an outcome. And it's through that process that we start to damage relationships, because fundamentally I'm meeting my needs and I'm meeting them at the expense of yours. For example, if I'm a leader, right? And if in the example of a father, I'm spending our vacation fund on alcohol, right? I'm actually meeting my needs and it's having a negative impact on you. And it's actually fundamentally misaligned with my intentions. Like when we sit down and say, what are you hoping for? What kind of impact do you want to create as a parent, as a leader, as a whatever? It's usually not, I want people to go hungry, right? And not get what they need from me, right? But there's that kind of need to control. So this means without getting into therapy territory, right? Which is, but from where I sit and from my experience with most senior leaders, like therapy first, then coaching, right? Trying to solve those kind of deep rooted problems. And Tyler, don't know about your experience, but it sounds like you've had those moments of like deep reflection on, hey, this is how I'm showing up. And it's rooted in Tyler and my wiring and the experiences that I've had. And that's just the reality is we've all had those experiences with power used well and poorly with us. And it's created a narrative inside of us around how power is supposed to show up. Yeah. And so we get some of that, we talk about toxic work environments. I don't love the language around toxicity because, there really isn't a toxic leader. There's toxic behaviors. There's toxic things, but, shifting away from that. How does this behavior make sense? Right. And making sense of it.
you
It
did
has to
this,
make
but
sense.
you're not this. Yeah, that's a tricky balance, right?
It's a super tricky balance, but that's why we try and get to that. So in between intention and impact is actions. Right? We actually use our power to take action in the world, or to not take action, to do things or not do things. That's what has the impact, right? And so getting really clear about what kind of actions reflect our intentions, and do more of those and less of the things that are accidentally or unintentionally causing harm, because that's usually the case. It's not, again, intentions versus impact. Take those good intentions, but we need to operationalize them. We need to look at how are you using your power actually in the world, because that's the thing that people are experiencing, right? It is the comment in the meeting that you didn't think twice about, or the flippant remark, or the all caps email on a Sunday night when you were frustrated by something, right? Those are the things that have the downstream impact.
Light your team on fire with that email over the weekend that you could have just waited. And, and I love I love the core thread of when things are out of balance or out of sync internally, like you will do things that from the outside appear to be against your best interest, but yet it's somehow meeting an internal need. And that deep work that's required to get there, and like, you keep doing this and it seems so destructive, but there's always a benefit, but sometimes it's so layered and so nuanced. It's doing the work to find out what that benefit is. And it might be pretty abstract to the host, as well as everyone around who's watching, right? Your friends, family, and coworkers, right? Because sometimes a blurry line, you spend more time with your coworkers than you do with your family.
Yeah,
Sure.
In our work, we always talk about what we can do. As you know, Jeff used the analogy of, or a leader's job is to engage people, not for them to be engaged by, right? And so when we look at our work, what we focus on is helping to create awareness. So blind spots or assumptions, really clearing those. Then once we have those, we can focus in, well, what's on most meaningful, and develop the right skills or competencies to navigate those. Mm-hmm. The third part, this is where maybe therapy might be needed, or coaching, is the willingness. If we're not willing to prioritize it, right, to really focusing on it, that's something as consultants, we just, like, at that point, it's like, what do you need to unlock to break through? Because you said you wanted to. And so that's where we might look at other modalities for their support, like therapy, coaching.
Well, it's the right tool, right? At the right point in your journey of like, okay, I want to get to some of those core beliefs, some of those core, and I know the word trauma gets thrown around a lot, but trauma can mean a lot of different things. It's you locked in a belief at a certain time because it served you. I joke, when's the last time you asked a 6-year-old for advice? Probably every day, just not sure what you're referencing, right? 12-year-old me can be a real, shithead in 50-year-old me's body, but 12-year-old me was just trying to survive and navigate it, right? Anyways, not to get down that road. 12-year-old me shows up when 12-year-old me shows up with 51-year-old me's resources, it can be a bit fiery. So let's find out what that lack of power, that ability, that need of control in your life, and those so many little nuances. Which you hear trauma, it sounds big. Often it can just be how you chose to navigate the world at a certain time on a certain point of your journey, right? Mm-hmm. And I go, so a lot of leaders will roll their eyes. Most of the leaders I know that have really engaged at that level have, like, just to overuse a term, but they've 10x their leadership. They showed up different. They showed up much more at peace. They showed up centered with themselves. And all of a sudden it wasn't about them anymore. It was about the people around them. And that's when the magic, that's when you see companies just blow up, or teams. And all of a sudden these like powerful high performers that also are in that same spot start getting attracted to those organizations. And you kind of want to work with other people who have done some of that work. And be okay to go, hey, I just want to talk about, I'm working on it. Like, it just changes the dynamic, creates a lot of safety around that too, in the messy bits. Gentlemen, I love this conversation. You clearly are sucking me right in. I feel like I'm becoming a guest on my own show because I want to contribute so much to what you guys are sharing. I really love it. And it's a practice. It's an ongoing, like, you might get it one day and the next day you might, but it's catching it. And I think that's so much giving ourselves permission to kind of be on the journey of like, hey, just because you missed a workout doesn't mean you're not into fitness anymore. It's just because you missed a day because you're busy. Just get back on track. And I think that metaphor can pull through a lot of this because there is no end. I haven't found one anyways. I hope I never find one right before I decide to exit this world. That'll be the end for me. And maybe even then, that's just the beginning of something else. Who knows? If people want to get a hold of you, is it? Call, obviously you guys are great conversationalists and you're so passionate. Is it just pick up the phone and have a chat with you guys?
Yeah, I mean, obviously everybody will email obviously is one way. But honestly, calling us, We love to have these, what we call them is like exploring mutual fit.
This feels like a conversation, not an email to me. That's why I was like, just pick up the phone. Like, you know what humans still do? Humans still do talk. And I think sometimes an email is a great tool and text and all the things, but a good conversation is hard to replace that. Case in point, we just had one.
I'd say, and then, you know, Jeff mentioned the Co. We've launched that. We'd love if people, we can talk about our work, but if people actually want to experience it, the Co is the best way. So we could invite people to just attend one of our, we have 2 sessions a month.
Sorry, I kind of skipped over that because we were chatting about so much.
No, it's,
is that on your current, can someone find that on your current website?
Yeah, it's under our offerings. It's community building and community membership. And we just launched it. So it's brand new. We'd love to have, you know, how about this? I'm going to do this on the spot for any of your listeners. We will, if they like it and they want to get a founding membership, we've closed that off. But for your viewers, if they really like it,
I love a special offer. I'm a marketer. Starburst, buy now before it's too late.
We will give them the founding. They're locked in if they want to renew for the founding membership of $350. Is it $350, Jeff? I can't remember. It's been a while. Yeah, $350 for the year.
Beautiful.
And just, but they can come for a free try it out first.
I love it. I love
They'll experience our work. That's the best way to understand
it. This is something you need to experience. You said the word. Yeah. It's experiential. We're human. We're all going to get something out of it. We're all going to bump into it in a different way. And I think that's the beauty of, like, I love what you guys are putting out there. And 10 people can show up and still kind of be on their own journey, but also still be in your program. That's what I love, or certainly what I heard or what I took away from it. Because we're all individual, we're all unique, and we're all a little bit messy, and that's okay.
We love that part.
To pretend other ways, it's just it's not real. The Ally Co, you guys are both on LinkedIn. Are those good platforms for you guys in terms of sending out smoke signals and connecting and all the things, right?
I love it. Yeah.
Connect on LinkedIn, send a DM, and we'll get a quick coffee on the either virtual or in person. And
that's how we met. We had a fabulous coffee. It was energizing. I was really excited about this conversation. I think we could go on for a couple hours. I love the work you guys do. I feel it's not only needed, I just think it's awesome, and I love the perspective at which you bring to it. So thanks for entertaining my enthusiasm for participating in this conversation as well.
Well, we're honored. We've seen the guest you brought on, and we love your whole focus on curiosity. So for us, when you gave us the opportunity, we were thrilled. And thanks for having both of us on. I know that's tough to manage sometimes.
Oh, it was fun. You managed the power dynamics of a podcast perfectly. Awesome. Amazing. Thank you, gentlemen. Really I encourage people to reach out. Don't take this at face value. Have a conversation. Reach out. Talk to you both. It was fabulous. So thank you for your time.
Thanks, Tyler.